And as mobile networks evolve to support AI-driven services, ultra-low latency applications, and rapidly increasing data consumption, the radio access network is undergoing a fundamental transformation towards intelligence, automation, and cloud-native design. The intelligent RAN represents the convergence of open RAN architectures, AI-driven optimization, advanced radio technologies, and programmable infrastructure. To discuss how operators are delivering greater performance, flexibility, and cost efficiency, this panel brings together industry leaders, including Anand Chandrasekhar, founder and CEO of Aira Technologies. Next to him is Vivek Murthy. He's president OSS business unit at Rakuten Symphony. And next to him is Rob Soni. He's vice president RAN at AT&T. And next to Rob is Manish Chabra. He's Senior Vice President and General Manager Mobility, that at the RadiSys Corporation. And next to me is Upindra Pingle, General Manager Andrew, that is an Amphenol company. And gentlemen, welcome to the session.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
I think I get a 90% on pronunciations of names. Anand, I want to start with you. Certainly moving towards AI RAN automation. How are suppliers and operators working better together now than, let's say, even a year ago?
I would say right now there's a lot of conversation, more conversation today amongst operators in terms of how they might utilize AI and generative AI in their environments, right? And you see, in terms of driving automation, TM Forum is a very good body to drive the standards that need to be in place in order to be able to drive that automation. And without those standards and those requirements from the collective operator community, becomes a little hard for anybody that supplies into that to be able to deliver what the operators need in order to be able to use AI to make their networks work more efficiently. So I think those conversations are happening. It's a much more mature level of conversation. In terms of what needs to happen further in addition to what's already happening, I think it would help if operators had for themselves, a clear view of how they're going to organize the data, how they're going to store the data and make it more accessible for themselves, right? And now if they're going to use third-party companies to basically use their solutions in their environment, then there has to be some mechanism for making some of that data either available in a synthetic way so models can be trained, tested, etc. So three-part answer there.
Yeah.
I think a lot of good conversations happening. There are operators that are very mature in terms of how they would organize the data lake. But the third piece, which is making data available to train, that I think is still a work in process.
Vivek, certainly Rakuten Symphony and Rakuten Mobile as well, working in the sandbox of working with operators as far as pushing autonomous networking. From this time, or compared to maybe this time last year, how is that collaboration between suppliers and operators?
Yeah, I mean, it's come a long way. We have a lot more partners on the radio side. As you know, we've got O-RAN as a technology, something that Symphony and Rakuten Mobile has, really pioneered and moved forward on. And so the entire CU/DU stack that's sitting out there, having more network radio partners is a big part of that, because then you have a lot more choice, a lot more options for our operators. So it's something that we are really seeing a lot of momentum come. We are working the labs with more and more radio partners now, and that whole opening of the platform is coming alive. What's happening at top of that is then, of course, the whole sort of SMO RIC side of things and enabling the kind of ecosystem and the RAPs to come at play. So we're seeing all of that, a lot more traction this year. In fact, when I joined the company last year, and the RIC platform itself was still in the lab. Went live, put into production, got a lot more apps running now. So yeah, I can see within Rakuten itself, there's a big, move forward evolution of this whole technology landscape.
Yeah, Rob, certainly AT&T has taken significant steps in this collaboration with the supplier community, just very recently, by the way, and we had a discussion this time last year. What's been, what's the progress since then?
I mean, I think we have a lot of proof points and positive things to report on our overall journey towards open. A lot of discussion about what does it take to move forward for an operator, especially a brownfield operator, to make those changes in a significant way, while also trying to achieve a basic business objective. And so our base business objective when we signed a deal with Ericsson at the end of 23 was to modernize and refresh our network assets. But we wanted to layer on top of that requirement of modernizing and building out our mid-band spectrum and making SA nationwide available, as well as support for RedCap also nationwide available. While we were doing that, we wanted to make sure that we were introducing either open capable or truly open assets in the network itself. And so we've been able to, and it's public, that we have now established commercial traffic volume on a small cell radio in our configuration, and we'll scale this year. So we're currently in the middle of the FFA for that small cell radio with Fujitsu and with Ericsson. But we also have a variety of partners also on the application front, on the SMO side. We have hardware partners specifically on the Cloud RAN side, and we have Cloud RAN now active in our network. So the hardware is coming from Dell, and of course another public data point. And then the application side is a very interesting front for us. I think in the old world of applications that ran for network automation or network optimization, 95 to 99% of them were largely either developed by the operator or whoever provided the platform. So we've now moved forward into an era where we now have an ability to take our applications that we had developed in the past and port them and bring them forward onto a new SMO platform, but also to enable a lot of third-party innovation from a variety of partners, one of which is sitting right there. Anand and his team from Aira have been quite active in helping us with looking at the impact and the direction of bringing generative AI capabilities directly into the RF domain, allowing us to move very quickly from generative now to agentic in framework, and think forward to how we might also move forward to autonomous for automation tasks, for root cause analysis, but also even to help us with the coding and development, which is an expensive task of actually, we want the radio engineers to think about the problems and the intent and to work in the intent-based world. And to enable that with AI-enabled engine is actually really powerful for us, because it should speed the cycle by which we can increase innovation in the network, which means finally we'll have opportunities to improve user experience through spectrum efficiency and otherwise. But so I see a lot of opportunities. Since the last year when we talked on the RAP side, we are looking at it now as an opportunity to use it for provisioning and auto provisioning of new elements in the network. So those third-party radios come in, they're managed and provisioned with an RAP. Our Cloud RAN is largely managed and provisioned with an RAP. We will bring, and we're now moving our DAS equipment. Upendra knows, so we're working with them on this. We're actually working specifically on using an RAP to provision and manage DAS. So this will be something else. And then, of course, on the small cell side, we're also looking to do that as well. So finally, we have lots of opportunities to bring new innovation in that space, which is what we consider the base automation use case of just actually day 0, day 1, day 2 operation of the gear in the network. But then there are other exciting use cases that we're exploring with partners, including interference management, sharing spectrum dynamically. We're also looking at even the interaction between non-terrestrial networks and terrestrial networks with AST. So running apps specifically that we would use to manage that. So we see a lot of growth in this. That I would say a year ago, many of these ideas were sort of conceptualized. We may have been talking about them at a very simplistic level, but now we're moving forward with deployment plans and action plans specifically to move forward aggressively. So a lot of action overall in that space. So between for us, the radio space, I think, is super active. We always have opportunities to change hardware on the baseband, and then the application space is also super active.
Manish, as we progress through the RIC, Open RAN, and these commercial deployments, what would you say is the trade-off between innovation and integration?
I would say, first of all, it's a journey. Integration is a journey, right? The first step is, of course, innovation, which has started with RIC being a overlay AI function on top of the current deployed networks, right? But as we go through integration, we can see that while the interface is defined in the standards level, that when we go to the next level, the interpretation of that standards and the implementation of those parameters or those APIs or XApps and RApps, that has to be implemented at each network function level. And I would further say it has to go down even from a network function, even to the level of, let's say, how the scheduler will behave, right? Or maybe, how the link adaptation algorithm will behave, or let's say RRM will behave. So eventually, that is a next level of specifications which have to, of course, emerge. which will smoothen out the integration process. But again, it's a journey, and we have seen what it took for the Open RAN to create like all these radios on 7.2 interface getting integrated today. It is much simpler compared to what it was 4 or 5 years back, right? So similarly on the RIC and let's say integration with the RAN, we are still at a relatively early stage.
Upendra, anything to add before I get into indoor wireless?
Yeah, I think I'll pick up from where Rob left. For indoor cellular, I think O-RAN has been a huge benefit. And of course, there's a trade-off between integration and the innovation. But a couple of examples I would like to say is we took our indoor small cell, and for AT&T, we actually connected that to the Ericsson automated platform. I think that was a big deal, huge change for indoor systems. And then for DAS, traditionally, DAS was looked at as like a separate system that does indoor. But because of O-RAN, we are now driving open interfaces with AT&T so that they can have a full visibility all the way to the edge of the network. That never happened for DAS, and O-RAN is making that available. Now, obviously, these are the benefits. It comes with challenges, or let me say learning. We did a couple of years back implement the first multi-vendor O-RAN system on DAS, and we learned a lot through that. I mean, to do interop with multiple vendors, it's a learning process. But once you do that, I think once you get that level of maturity, the second and the third and the fourth one starts getting easier and easier. So I think O-RAN brought that benefit to indoor cellular, which was not there before.
And I wanted to go back to you. AI-driven RAN intelligence, creating new revenue streams, new business models. Maybe give the audience an example of one of those.
So a couple of things, right? Operator networks are generating tons of data, and only a fraction of that data is actually being utilized, both for driving efficiencies of the network, but also for utilizing it to figure out, okay, where might the next opportunity be, right? And because you're only using a piece of the data, if you actually wanted to use more than a piece, let's say instead of using 5% of the data that's available to you, you want to say use 50% of the data, let alone 100%. The only way you can actually use 50% of the data is by employing AI at scale, right? And that, when you use AI at scale, you get insights about the network that you can use to improve operational efficiency, but you're also going to get insight about the network, particularly from a predictive standpoint, that can tell you where something might occur. And you can use those kinds of things to figure out, are there monetization opportunities there, right? So for example, if I am going to be going for the Super Bowl game, right, and the game ends at a particular point, you know there's a whole bunch of traffic there, but you can probably predict, based on past history, where are people finished with the Super Bowl going next. A lot of them will go home. Some may not. Some may continue to go to a bar nearby, etc. And I'm making this up on the fly. But past history is informative about where they might go next. So if you could figure that out, is there a monetization opportunity in terms of giving additional information and say, hey, there's this location available. Could that be an advertising opportunity for the vendor that may be the place people deposit? I think yes, right? So I think there's quite a bit of opportunity for AI to be able to certainly improve cost efficiencies and network efficiencies. But down the road, as the network can become more programmable, I think there are also revenue generation opportunities.
Rob, AI-driven RAN intelligence for new business revenue streams. Anything to add?
It's a good point or question to ask. I think what we want to make sure that it's really clear, and there's a lot of noise about AI RAN here at this conference. AI RAN is today. You know, we're not waiting for a change in hardware, a change in solution, a change in software. We are actively deploying and integrating AI in the network, specifically in the RAN network. And I gave you already a few examples of the things that we're doing with Aira, but it goes beyond that. We use and leverage AI in things like energy savings and in outage compensation, things that we have developed on our own before that continue to become more actively AI powered. I think what we look forward to is that they move from sort of rule-based or purely machine learning-based into things that become finally agentic. But, you know, in terms of the opportunity for revenue and revenue creation through AI, I think it's an open question. I mean, there may be selective opportunities where we can create value by exposing what we are doing with AI So it's a simple example. Like we built a ray tracing engine, which we've been somewhat public about. This ray tracing engine leverages AI to do the interpolation and takes us from typical 50-meter kind of accuracy down to around 4-meter accuracy. It also allows us to run predictions in near real time, getting outcomes of 400 square kilometers in minutes as opposed to days or even weeks. So this is what finally is important. This is infrastructure that we use to optimize the network. But the real discussion we're having right now is, well, geez, this helps us with understanding what kind of experience a user will have in a given area. And a number of device manufacturers have approached us and asked for, hey, we'd like to have some visibility in what that is, so that we can plan around that and essentially decide what type of service we're going to offer, what kind of application we will host, an application workload we'll host as a result of that. So there's opportunities, I think, that exist for us to take the work we're doing to bring AI in the network and then ultimately provide new types of APIs, new type of API exposure to device makers, to IoT makers, to self-driving car makers, to say, okay, what kind of network are you going to experience in this area? And it allows them to tune their applications according to what kind of experience they're going to see.
Manish, I wanted to get back to indoor wireless and what really suppliers can do to help and support operators in allowing them to really permeate that market.
So I think even on the business side, it kind of correlates to, and I was thinking of what Rob was saying. I would say the positioning is a very important use case for indoor, right? And that's where, with the AI coming in and all the different AI models working on that, depending upon, of course, the data and stuff like that, that can actually be translated also into a opportunity, a business opportunity for operators by creating positioning algorithms, right, which will be unique based on AI. So as I would say, most important, it would be to open up the interfaces to allow for software, right? So all these, I would say, integration points to come in where the AI engines can really drive this through the software. So there is intelligence which is currently built into the software, but then rather than using algorithms which are static algorithms, they have to be dynamic, right? So they have to be based on, of course, the data coming in from the operators, but going back to the generative AI concept, right? They should be able to generate and think about coming back to what it should really apply towards. Every problem is different, and to be able to predict that in a particular environment, in an indoor environment, depending upon, let's say, you're in a venue where you don't have much walls versus you're in an area where you have a lot of walls, how the positioning will work, how the even in terms of like what is the kind of user experience you're able to give, right? In terms of the radio which is deployed. So all of those parameters will also lead to user experience, which eventually leads to the business case.
Opindra, certainly operators looking for that seamless indoor experience and supplying that for their customers, enterprise customers as well. How are suppliers like Opindra sort of lending a hand there? Sorry, like Andrew.
I'll take that.
It's a proper name.
I'll take that. Indoor is a very interesting space. Indoor is a very complex space. We all know that majority of the data traffic is generated indoors. And we also all know that majority of the RAN spend is done on outdoor. So it's a very unique, strange combination. But I'll pick up from the example Anand you gave, that there is a Super Bowl game that just got over. People are leaving, some go home, some go to the bar, some will go to casino. So just thinking from an ORAN implementation perspective, if you had a static indoor system, you cannot cater to all of those scenarios. When you have a dynamic system, a digital DAS, wherein the baseband is sitting in one pool location somewhere, and the remotes are now sitting in stadiums, similar remotes are sitting in casinos and bars and hospitals. Now I'm able to cater to all that audience before, during, and after the game. So I think that's a huge benefit that ORAN brings. And that is exactly what we've been doing for the last 3-4 years. But that's mainly on the large public venue side. There is also another case for indoor, for enterprises. Small buildings like this convention center we have, there the requirements are completely different. There, the enterprises are used to Wi-Fi. So they want the simplicity, they want the ease of use. So how do you define a system, indoor system, that actually mimics that kind of a simplicity? And again, ORAN plays a good role there because Wi-Fi is used for like COT servers. So with ORAN, we can get in and standard off the shell servers and deploy our system there. So that's what we've been doing. Now, the question in terms of what AI can bring to the table. Well, all these complications that you can have the baseband in one place, remotes all over the place, you can have somebody's baseband and somebody's remote. It comes with the complication of interop. And I think AI can come in there and simplify that. It can predict where the system can go down and go fix that problem ahead of time. It can move the traffic based on the patterns that, again, Anand talked about. So I think there is a huge convergence point between AI and Open RAN. And I also think there is a huge convergence point between IT and telecom as we get into indoors.
Vivek, real quickly, AI-powered optimization and the correlation with sustainability and energy efficiency. Maybe, again, give us an example.
Yeah, I mean, scores of apps, in Rakuten Mobile itself, we have built our apps in collaboration with them from Symphony. Massive MIMO, transmission muting, very, very good use case to have. Similarly, bringing down just indoor switch cells as the last person gets out of office, things like that. There are lots and lots of energy saving scenarios for which apps are being built. I think the key here is that it's easier to find the use case because that's what humans have been doing all this while. The harder thing to do is to industrialize it at a scale where it can run across a country like Japan in this case. That's where we have to do a lot of work to make sure firstly that the data that you're getting, the pipelines are good real time. I don't mean near real time, but I mean in a matter of 5 minutes and 10 minutes. You need to be able to get that KPI because if something goes wrong, most important thing is that you want to be able to turn it off or roll back. So we are seeing these kind of scenarios play out well as well. Energy saving. We also want to make sure that the stack itself is robust enough so that when you make changes to the network for energy saving and so on, it's one thing to make the change successfully, but if the feedback loop is not correct, right, you don't know what's happening in the network, that can lead to chaos. So a lot of these energy saving apps, there are lots of scenarios. I think we are seeing them just get rolled out. It's an evolution, not AI is not a revolution, it's an evolution. We're seeing lots of use cases around them for different kinds of radio, indoor, outdoor. Most important thing is to make sure that it can really be industrialized at scale by making sure the stack is super robust, resilient to all kinds of error conditions. And ultimately, you want to move from, like Anand was saying, right, a lot of this is reactive, but actually we want to get into a bit more proactive sort of situation where we can predict things with reasonable accuracy, event-driven search. That's very important for us to look at as well. So yeah, all these places where we can actually really optimize the energy based on scenarios.
Rob, AI-driven networks, certainly security a big factor, and it should be a big factor and part of the discussion. Zero trust, supply chain trust. How are operators managing that with AI progressing so quickly?
AI is touching every aspect of our business. And so on the supply chain side, it's an easy one to say that at the moment, you can imagine that we can benefit by using AI to help with contract review, contract evaluation, as well as even potentially contract generation. So that helps our supply chain team. And that's something that is being examined carefully for where that applies and where that can be used. We use AI particularly in helping us plan for how we build out and what things are needed specifically. So we have been constructing digital twins in the network for a while, scanning sites, getting physical imagery of the sites themselves. So as they go through modernization, the build kit gear that's needed to modernize and upgrade and update those sites can be used or inferred based on AI. AI imaged of the sites themselves, and then finally an AI understanding specifically of the holes and the gaps, as opposed to using the sort of typical way that it would be done with lots of site visits, with lots of human interaction. This starts to simplify the process by which you do modernization and you do upgrades on sites. So this is another important aspect for us overall and how it's touching things. I don't think I answered the first part of your question though. What was the first part of your question?
With AI-driven networks progressing so quickly, how are operators managing these security risks, these cyber?
So security is an interesting topic by itself. I mean, I think for us, the AI discussion starts with a question of what data do you make available to third parties and what platforms do you make available to third parties? And it's an ongoing discussion that we have. And, we're working through the governance process themselves to be able to maximize the innovation potential and innovation velocity without taking risk. about potentially introducing risk in the network itself. Zero trust is going to be a big topic as we move to the next generation of cellular standards. Hopefully we can roll it in without significant updates or upgrades to existing hardware. But we know that, today there's an opportunity for people to use quantum and otherwise to break keys that exist. So we're seeing a lot of work ongoing today in standards, specifically on defining quantum safe encryption keys for security. So that's a big part of it in this, with respect to trust and zero trust. But honestly, as we AT&T have been on a journey towards open disaggregated hardware and software across the network from transport, core, and RAN for a while, we've been exposed to the problems of basically having software that comes from third parties or exposure of the software that typically isn't present when you have an appliance-based network. So we've been going through this. I mean, we've even raised the bar on what we do with respect to even appliance-based software itself, but we continue to scan software, look for vulnerabilities, raise requirements specifically on the vendors who participate in our network to make sure that they meet our intense security requirements. Nothing is perfect, but I can tell you every day we work harder on this. This is not a topic. We no longer view this as it's someone's responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility in the R&D chain.
Yeah. Very quickly, sort of the quick fire question. I'll start with Upendra and go down the line here. If we're sitting here this time next year talking about building the intelligent RAN, and maybe in your case, indoor wireless, what could the topic or should the topic be?
My view is that indoor is a great playground to prove in both Open RAN as well as AI RAN, because of the complexity, because of the funding models. End of the day is the commercialization that is the question. Can we make money out of this whole thing? I mean, we can talk all day long about different technologies, but can we make money out of it? So my view is that if we can design an indoor network that is secure, that is autonomous, that is scalable, and that is energy efficient, then we are actually paving the road for that monetization.
Manish?
I would say interoperability is a very big factor for especially AI. Currently, AI is being done in different segments or different silos, let's say each operator driving their own strategy, but also somewhere these information, not with respect to data, of course, because data is proprietary to each operator, but the concepts can be shared. The architecture can evolve in terms of spreading AI even to all the layers of the network. And that becomes a base for as we evolve into 6G, right? So,
Rob, anything to add?
I mean, I think you asked what we'll be talking about next year. I hope we're all reporting on progress on how we're implementing AI in the network itself, and how we're seeing it sort of change user experience and then potentially offer those opportunities for monetization.
Vivek?
Very quickly, I know we're running out of time. I think it'll be lovely to see agentic solutions built on top of this, stitching autonomous behaviors.
Anand, this time next year?
I'm going to pick up on what Rob said. I hope next year we're talking about how many apps were generated by AI that AT&T has deployed.
Wow.
How much cost has come out of the network using AI. How much additional revenue they were able to generate using AI. So numbers where AI helped as opposed to pontificating about what AI might or might not do. I hope that's what we're talking about next year.
Well, building the intelligent RAN will definitely be on the program this time next year. Anand with Aira Technology, thank you so much. Vivek with Rakuten Symphony. Rob, as always, with AT&T. Manish, good to meet you with RadiSys Corporation. Upendra, as always, with Andrew. Or Upendra. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.